So this is a juror slash artist talk for our mind mapping exhibition. We normally do jurors talks if you guys are familiar, but this is kind of the first time we're incorporating artists into what we're doing, just because of the conceptual nature of the show and how involved you all, obviously you're involved in every piece of work that you put out in any exhibition, but I think this one kind of forced you to introspect, um, um, think about things a bit more than you normally would. And we just kind of want to get that perspective from you. Your insights, what went into making your piece, how you thought about the exhibition, et cetera, et cetera. I'm Amani Freeman, exhibitions manager for the MFA. Our juror today is Lisa Murphy. Miss Murphy is an artist, educator, and an activist. Aside from being a local artist, teacher, writer, and photographer, she went to the University of Maryland and graduated with a Master's of Arts in Communications, and she creates bold paintings and prints that are layered and infused with meaning. Her work has been exhibited in both private and public galleries, including What Is Ours, a nationally juried exhibition at the Sandy Spring Art Museum, and Shifting Earth, an exhibition of her large-scale reduction lino prints at the Via Umbria Gallery in Washington, D.C. She has taught art classes throughout the Washington area, including at the World Bank, the Strathmore Museum of Art, Glen Echo, Glen Echo Park Art Center, Fox Hill Senior Living, and Montgomery County Public Schools. Most recently, she was invited by the Women's Caucus for Art to serve as a juror for the Pivotal exhibition. It was an exhibition that explores art and activism. It was nationally juried and it was held at the Montpelier Art Center in Laurel, Maryland. Currently, Ms. Murphy serves on the advisory boards of Photo Works in Glen Echo Park, and she lives with her family in Bethesda, Maryland. So now I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Murphy. She can say a few words and then get us started.
Amani, thank you. Thank you for being a fantastic contact and exhibition coordinator for this show. And thanks to the Maryland Federation of Art. And I'm going to also say thank you all for making time. It's so nice to see names and faces and like put it all together with your artwork. I also want to pay tribute to the 270 entries that we got for this show from all of the artists for Mind Mapping 2024. I was asked to do a difficult task. I had to narrow it down to approximately 65 from 270, and that was tough. And here we've invited 5. 4 of you were able to attend. Laura de Valencia is not able to join us, but I'm so pleased that you could join us for the jurors talk. As Amani referenced, I think this particular show, while it is interesting to hear what I think about your work and why I've asked you to be on this call, I think it's 1,000 times more interesting for me, essentially, to hear about your intentions and your process and any reflections you have, especially given the nature of this. I would like to recognize the 4 of you, as well as Laura, who I mentioned cannot be here, but you all are here because you have received the Jurors' Choice Award. And I was only allowed 5 Jurors' Choice Awards, and I want to congratulate each and every one of you. I've also been given a chance to give out 5 honorable mentions. So one question that Amani wanted me to cover before we introduce you and ask you to talk about your work is my juror's statement. It's up online if you want to read it, along with all the work. But I will tell you right now what I was looking for. I was looking for creative acts of courage. I wanted to get some insight into what your inner landscape looked like. I was particularly interested in the creative mind at work. So you're going to hear words from me when the time comes about the artist's labor and what I saw in your work that really illustrated that creative mind at work. I was looking for works with meaning, layered with meaning, but also wide open to interpretation. So it had sort of specificity, but it could be embraced by many. And I will say, and I said this in my juror statement, for me as the juror, the works in this show are incredibly memorable. For each one of them resonates for me. I think Amani's word was stickiness. That's what we were looking for, works that stuck with me. And of all the works that I saw, the 65 that are in the show had that stickiness factor. And that is particularly true for your 4 works as well as Laura's. So I'm going to extend my congratulations to each of you. And we're going to take a look at your work online and ask you to talk a little bit about it. A word about logistics. My understanding from Amani is that we're going to pull up your artwork and it'll be on the screen and you'll have an opportunity to briefly, 3 to 5 minutes, introduce yourself, speak about your intentions, your process, and any reflections you have about whether it's your work now that it's being seen in public or about the show as a whole. And I think we're going to kick off. Do you have Ty's work first?
I do.
My name is Ty Bolin Reeves. The piece that I entered for this show, it started as one of the earlier pieces in a series that I had started developing in the past year or so, which is just about materials. Is kind of the major focus that I was interested in looking at. I wanted to look at the way materials behaved and sort of get into some like visual metaphors for the behavior of those materials. And so this was the first of 3 pieces that I had created initially out of cast iron and bronze. And it was the beginning of the series that I had started to develop, which then got into integrating similar kind of ideas, but with just air-filled balloons and these metal and steel sort of elements. And so this was a kind of infantile sort of introduction into kind of that series. And so, some of my reflections on this piece specifically after I had submitted it to this show, my major interest was just thinking about materials and kind of, in this visual metaphor. There's these, it's this minimalistic sort of interplay of this kind of organic, soft structure things and these more engineered, kind of machined sort of like heavy steel structure. And I was just interested in, this interplay of relationships, basically. This kind of, this soft and hard kind of feel. There's this sort of arresting time that I was also kind of interested in, which sort of gets into this sort of photographic element of things, kind of capturing this very moment, kind of briefly and suspending that moment. And so my interest mainly to start in the development of the work was about material and about those kind of metaphors. But then as I started reading about the show and considering my work and entering it, it helped me kind of see things in a more emotional way. It kind of made me connect away from my sort of strict materialistic focus into the actual relationships that were kind of being conveyed. And I sort of wanted to encapsulate these ideas of, compression, conformity. There's this sort of liquid solid state of things happening as well. But sort of inherent in all of that is the kind of relationship of those things. Yeah, so that's sort of the short of me and my piece there.
Thank you so much. I will tell you that this absolutely captured my attention. I responded to this in terms of immediacy. And I'm so glad that you used the word time in your description. It felt like there was tension. And I've got to say, there was a certain amount of surrendering. I loved and appreciated not just the two materials, but how one felt extremely organic and the other was more sort of geometric man-made. It had those vibes to it. And I also appreciated that there was an inflection point, a meeting point of these two textures and surfaces and materials. And it made me ask questions, Ty, and I really enjoyed where my mind went. It made me ask about, is this a mind suppressed or weighted down? Or is this more of a support? And I really enjoyed those ideas. And those all were brought up by sort of what your sculpture sort of delivered. I was very pleased to recognize this for a Juror's Choice Award.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, a lot of what you're saying is sort of exists ancillary around this, this series that I started developing. And there's, yeah, I like I said, material was like a major focus, and I was just sort of kind of coming, from this one track of ideas. And there was only, I think probably the other artists in this call can identify that, like, only after something is done and you've sort of got to, release the air, so to speak, out of your artistic breath and see, like, oh wait, there, the thing I was focusing on is there, but there are these other metaphors, these other ideas that kind of exist there. And so then the expansiveness of the flexibility of some of those narratives starts to kind of show itself, which is only evident when you're done and have completed the whole process.
Yeah. So Trudy, if you would like to take it away, again, just to refresh, I'd love to hear about your, well, an introduction as an artist, and then intention, process, and any reflections you'd like to share.
Most of my collage work, or I would say maybe all of my collage work, is done using papers related to the subjects that I'm working with. So I do a lot of portrait work. I use my subject's own personal papers. I do some interpretations of birds that are local. I use papers from where they're from or papers that tell the story. In this particular piece, when I heard that the subject was mind mapping, I thought, well, here we are, here it is. I have often had shows where people come up to me and say, I would love to get inside your mind. And I say, just take a look. It's all there for you. And in this case, it really is. This is a self-portrait called Insomnia. And I do suffer from insomnia. And part of the reasons are right there coming out of my mind. And so it was a natural extension of this topic. You can see that once I got started, actually, I was at a residency and I was up late at night. We were having a meteor shower, which was wonderful. And I started cutting out this sky imagery. But then as the night progressed and I wasn't sleeping, I began to think about all kinds of things that keep me up, and found the papers and found more papers, and it evolved into this piece. It actually won't be the last piece on the topic because there's so much to mine. But mind mapping is something that really occurs naturally to me in my work. I'd like to see how each time it is a little different. Some of the pieces that I've worked on have very abstract imagery, not that this is concrete, but really abstract thoughts and feelings. This is very direct. I really felt like it was a map. And ironically, I use a lot of maps in my work as well. My face in this one is the dark side of the moon, which seemed to make sense to me. I think it's kind of self-explanatory. I have a degree in fine arts in metalsmithing and goldsmithing and have had a long career as a goldsmith. And so using very tiny pieces of paper and using the materials and skills of a goldsmith, work very well for me doing collage work like this. I like to think about words. They often come out of texts that I'm reading, and sometimes they're rearranged and become poetry. A lot of these came out of psychology texts that talked about amnesia and sleeplessness. And the idea of time is very important in my work. Time, new perspectives, going a little deeper into the narrative of the subject by using these related papers and showing something that is not so much on the surface, but if you go a little beyond the surface, deeper into the subject using documents and papers, it really starts to tell a much broader story about the subject. And that's what I'm interested in my work, and continue to work on those themes.
I recognize the personal nature of this piece, as well as the difficulty and sort of the haunting quality, but I was initially drawn to it for so many reasons. First of all, you've created beauty out of pain. And I really respect your choices and decisions in this piece. The spiraling, repeating shapes really drew me in. The light and the dark. I like so much that the words really come together and literally weigh down your eyes. Fatigue and anxiety are right there as they're sort of pressing down. And I appreciate the nuances, the break in sort of this circle that encompasses your head, almost the halo. I will tell you that as a juror, it felt like I was discovering or exploring not only your insomnia, but those restless, slow, warp speed experiences that often occur at 3:30 in the morning for me. I felt that I had a connection there. And yet this is clearly a very personal piece. Anything that has that much packed into it, I felt compelled for your work to receive the Juror's Choice Award.
I'm happy to hear that you were able to relate to it, even though it is a very personal story, with your own story, that it takes you beyond.
And the organic, that snail coming out, oh, that just makes me crazy. I really like that. So thank you so much.
First of all, it is so unusual for my last name starting with the CA to be not first in any alphabetical lineup that this has been, very refreshing. And I'm happy to have a chance to talk about this piece a little more. As an artist, I am almost always a very representational artist. I work in acrylic paint and I work in mixed media collage, and am typically doing work that depicts portraiture, people, wildlife, landscapes. And this was a huge departure for me, and a little bit of an adventure and a little bit uncomfortable during the process, which was so fascinating. I wanted to challenge myself to paint without knowing what the outcome would be, which is not a space that I feel very comfortable. And after talking to some artist colleagues who I admire and looking at some work that inspired me, I was like, all right, I'm going to just sit down and give it a try. And so my typical work is in very bright color, or at least abstract, sort of non-traditional color. And, so that was where I gravitated. And I got out the fluorescence and I got out oil pastels, which I never use. And I just allowed myself to begin with mark making and see where it took me. And what was really fascinating to me is it took me to places where I began to see my sort of typical subject matter start to bubble up. And for me, I started to see a bunny in our bottom left corner. I started to see a human figure in the center. I started to see some landscape-like elements across the top. And I allowed myself to develop them a little bit, but held back from going all the way because I really just wanted to see what would happen. When I was done, as Ty was saying earlier, and I was able to step back and look at it, I completed this actually before the call for entry for mind mapping had sort of hit my radar. And I looked at it and I said, that is what that is what it feels like is happening inside my mind at any given time. You say map and it sounds very linear. There is nothing linear happening inside my mind on a regular basis. And for me, that act of doing figurative or very representational work is a way that where I find a lot of peace and a lot of calm because it allows me to focus and really be going down a path and be able to go down a sort of deep dive on a particular topic. And so this inverted the whole equation for me as an artist. And it was uncomfortable until it became comfortable and I was able to just sort of lean into it and see what happened. And so I was so delighted when the call came out with the mind mapping topic because this felt like it fit right into it. And so, for me, this is as close as a representation as I can muster of kind of what is emerging and fading away, all at the same time inside my mind. And when I'll do my more typical type of work, I would grab onto that bunny, and I'd really turn it into a bunny. But here it starts to emerge and it starts to fade away and something else takes its place. And I really enjoyed that in my own experience of this piece once it was completed.
Thank you so much. This grabbed my attention and I could not forget it. It felt like a molten lava of thoughts and ideas and sort of a fire within. And the more I looked at it, as you said, I saw shapes and colors that I had not noticed. I saw textures. It feels like Trudy's work. It feels really intimate. And yet, because I recognize it's a window into what you're experiencing, and yet it's something that I can connect with. And I love that dialogue back and forth. And I love the idea that you use the word mark making, because that is one of the things that I so appreciate about this piece. I also, as an artist, as an educator, I am constantly thinking about process, and I will use the word progress over outcome. And to hear you use that kind of language, that makes me just delighted.
Thank you so much for that feedback. Yeah, the molten is a great description because the orange fluorescent got a lot of play in this one. And however, and I think that could carry a tone of something being negative. And I don't know how other people read this, but that is not how it felt to me. It felt vivid and vibrant and maybe very, very busy, but not, in my experience of this work, not negative or angry or any of those other emotions that you may get from the bright reds and oranges. And I appreciate your feedback about sort of how this evolved in the way that you viewed it with your time with it as well. Thank you.
Yeah. And it is interesting. I use orange and red and even magenta in my work quite a lot. And those colors can be read as rage. I just went to the Rothko exhibit at the National Gallery of Art and just sort of sat with his work. And I felt like his reds and oranges definitely had rage, but I don't read this in that same way. It feels like this is movement and flow and energy. Our fourth artist to receive the Juror's Choice Award is Laura Di Valencia. her work is titled Universal Language of Labor. And I'm just going to pull a few sentences from Laura's statement that she sent me. She's a native of Barranquilla, Colombia, and she immigrated to the United States in 2007. Her research-focused work explores in this piece her immigrant father's job as a landscaper. While deeply autobiographical, her work aims to connect a shared experience of the diaspora, and she works to demonstrate the diverse perspectives of those impacted by the US borders and the enduring consequences that accompany their stories. When I asked her a little bit about her process, talk about fascinating, she uses the app Map My Walk, and she uses it to trace her father's lawnmower paths when he cuts grass at other people's homes, a job that does not require interaction and that he chose to do when he immigrated to the US at an age when he felt incapable of learning the English language. She actually set the Map My Walk app on wheelchair setting so that she could accurately track her dad's mower movement, and it could be detected by the app. Her reflections are kind of mind-blowing. She is attempting in this piece to validate her father's labor as a form of language. She said that the work invites me to think about perimeters and how they are experienced by the immigrant, the places that they are allowed to go, and the places that they can only dream of. And she also mentioned that even though her dad can walk, and in fact uses his mobility in his job, because he cannot speak the language, it actually feels like he has a disability that he challenges every day through his labor. So those are the things she shared with me. And I will tell you, I couldn't get this piece out of my head. I so appreciate the concept and the intention, the personal, meaningful nature of this. And as she said in the title, the universality. Like Marissa's work, the mark making felt like a code or language that she was sharing briefly with me. And much like Ty's work, I felt like this was a stop motion in time. It also raised questions and turned over a lot of questions in my head. Who does this kind of work? Is this labor valued? Is it visible? Or is it in fact invisible? And it made me think about equality and equity and inclusivity. And I will also tell you all that her decision to photograph it on a field of grass, initially when I first looked at it, I thought, well, this is not cropped to the subject. And then reading her artist statement, I thought, oh, that is brilliant. If any of you have any response to this work, I would love to hear it. Just take yourself off of mute if you'd like to share.
I totally agree with you, Lisa. There's this beautiful sort of coalescence between the idea and the sort of thesis of what she wants to do, and then the product. I think that like the really simple linear structure is amazing. Something that really draws me in is a concept that I recently have been learning about in a lot of like traditionalist Chinese like image making is called, I think it's Liai Bao, I believe. And I think it roughly translates to like blank space or white space. And it's this idea within these sort of traditionalist Chinese compositions, which we might be familiar with, maybe like trees or mountains or birds or something like this. And then these great vast areas of unpainted, untouched canvas. And And I think there's this sort of beautiful balance of that present, at least within this piece of Laura's, because the kind of unworked versus worked sort of surface area is it just feels really balanced, and that kind of minimalism, I find it really inviting.
I would say that as someone who's very literal, seeing the floor plan and then watching those lines move is so intriguing. Say, what's happening? You know, where are we going from this? Again, a map of a different sort. And even if I don't know what's going on, if it's about language, it suggests language to me in the way that it moves. It's very intriguing.
And I would tie it back to Marissa's statement. Talk about surrendering to the process. You know, you don't know what the outcome's going to look like. And who the hell cares if it's, and this is in air quotes, a success or not? You are taking an artistic, creative exploration of process, and you are mapping a piece of labor, and you're trying to pay tribute and give that work literally credibility and value.
I have a very less eloquent statement on this, and that is, I just felt privileged as an American after hearing her statement, and I was moving. It's all wonderful to hear what this is, and I mean, it is extraordinary on a lot of levels, and everyone described them, but I was moved. That's all.
And Bob, that is an element that I think can be applied to each piece that is receiving a Juror's Choice Award. Not only for me was really all of the works here memorable, but they moved me. As a way to introduce your work, Bob, I think, Amani, if you're ready, we can look at Bob's piece here. And Bob, I'm so pleased that this is included in the top 5. So I'm going to let you talk to us about this piece, and then I'd love to share some of my thoughts on it.
Okay, where this all starts is I'm a frustrated musician in a lot of levels. I have a lot of my friends are musicians. I don't play a musical instrument, and it's always been the disappointment of my life that I don't. But I've been a student of classical music, and on a lot of levels, I always wanted to find a visual, I don't want to call it transcription, just a visual interpretation of something about music. This is all described on the back of this piece in a little bit too long description, but I've always been a huge fan of Bach. He just blows my mind every time I hear something written by him or performed well by him. Anyway, and then I started messing with fugue and toccata, and the toccata and fugue, as I'm sure you've all heard. And all of a sudden, after hearing a visual description of what fugues and toccatas are supposed to be, something happened, and I knew that I could get the flavor, and that's what all of this is. I mean, how a toccata, for instance, which is the opening piece, the opening bar, staff up there, is show off. It's I'm excuse me for the word, but it's masturbation for a musician. And then the rest of them is the fugue, where all great classical stuff works like this. You're something's happening, and some element of that goes into the next bar or movement, and then it's translated again into the next one. And always there's something that's an explosion of some kind within these fugues, and that's what these little stars are. But anyway, my medium wood is, especially when you approach it from the point of view of a painter, which I was, a hobbyist painter, it's like very intimidating when you first start messing with it. I mean, I'm a retired cabinet maker, and as such, you know, wood was doing something else. I was building a cabinet, I was building furniture, I was whatever, paneling. And now I'm using it to make an image, and whether it's this image or an image of something actual, the immediate thing is, oh my God, I can't do this. Why isn't it paint? Why can't I make it do this? What finally happened was I let the wood talk to me. And now it's like, I have this incredible partner, and the grain is always supplying something that I couldn't possibly have come up with. This is not the piece that described that. I have many others that describe it to you very much more clearly. I'm proud of this on this level. This was done in 2022. And the minute I heard this mind mapping thing, I said, that's it. This is the piece.
Yeah.
I submitted several others. One other was included. But this one, I probably in a lot of levels am most proud of, because there was an intent there. I really was trying to do something specific. So much of my work is, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. It's interesting what Marissa said, but she doesn't do that. I do that every day. I start with something. I don't know any idea what this is going to become. As a matter of fact, the other one did start that way. The other piece that was in here. And within a third of the way into it, I knew what it was. You should all have such a medium that just gives you things.
Bob, I'm very pleased to recognize this work. This, I mean, right off the bat, I appreciate the exquisite craftsmanship. Your handling of the material is just beautiful. But the idea that I am responding to the rhythm and the flow and the movement, the repeating lines, the composition, it really does read as music. And I am not somebody who reads music. It sings to me. And I can see the flow of the bottom sort of lines, one into the other. I also will tell you that as a juror, I appreciate the contrast that you have here. You've taken wood, this organic, very natural material, and yet you are shaping it into a patterned, rhythmic, I'll use the word geometric space. It delivers then this natural geometry and natural logic and natural language that I responded to. And your work, like every other work recognized by a Juror's Choice Award, it just invites me in and it asks me to sit a while with it and sort of read into it. And I, for that reason, just so appreciate it.
I got one of the greatest lessons in my life. I was at as a matter of fact, Rehoboth Jazz Festival. I was invited to show my work there. And I had a piece that a very young hip hopper, I mean, I love this kid. He's literally dancing across the floor, and he gets up to where I am standing, and there's my piece right over my shoulder. And he says, "What's the name of that?" And I told him the name of it. He says, no, that's not the name of that. And I said, "Great, what is the name of that?" And he says, "I don't know, but that's not it." And I thought to myself, wow, this whole naming thing is kind of a joke, isn't it? Because everybody gets to say what they see.
And to have a conversation and allow for the viewer to come in and respond to your piece, you've given me space to do that. I really do want to congratulate each and every one of you. This was not an easy decision, and I'm really, really proud of this show, and I'm very excited about your work.
Like Ms. Murphy said, thank you all so much for coming today, sharing your insights, and just giving us like the opportunity to see inside of your head and see what you were thinking going about the exhibition.
Artist, this is John Allen's work titled Firewalker 2007, and it is my first choice for honorable mention for Mind Mapping 2024. And I respect so much about this work. I appreciate Alan's color choices, the light, the dark, the orange. I also appreciate the contrasts between the logical, hard-edged digital mapping marks that he has, and that flow of the skull and the spine. And if I could draw your attention to the fire spinners down the center, every time I look at this piece, I read more into it. The fire flow especially works for me, and this sort of succession of time stamping. Again, it reminds me a little bit of Ty's work, the sculptural work, where we were watching him try and capture an immediate moment, and stopping this moment of creative motion of fire spinning with this mark of remembrance. A timestamp in this piece, I think, is really creative. Chuck Anderson has given us a piece titled Length of a Helix, and he also is receiving an honorable mention for Mind Mapping 2024. I am completely fascinated by Chuck Anderson's intention in this piece. He describes writing out on a napkin, trying to figure out how much wire he needs to create a helix for a sculpture that he's working on. So essentially, this is mathematical equations. And yet, I really appreciate how he thinks, because he took that back of the napkin sketch and thought, my God, this process, my preparation for art, my movement towards art, that in itself is creative. And the idea that he chose to represent this in printmaking form, again, such a good decision. And dialing back to Laura de Valencia's work, where she talked about the universal language of labor, for me, this is mental labor, but giving it weight and credibility and acknowledging that this is also creative. For the third honorable mention award, I'm presenting it to Lauren Cook, and she has given us a work titled Drawing Details of Creative Captivity. What is completely fascinating about Lauren's work is that this, like Chuck Anderson's work, is actually a preparation for a piece of art. But it is a thoughtful, creative, beautiful preparation. It felt like I was seeing her creative mind at work. So the fact that it worked beautifully with the mind mapping theme. It also felt like so many of the pieces we've looked at, it felt intimate and personal. I felt so privileged to almost be looking at Lauren Cook's journal, or even more, her diary. Because if you read through some of these words in her piece, these are highly personal. It's a diagram of her intention and a diagram of the mind at work. And I cannot leave this piece without also drawing attention to the fact that her mark making that she's chosen really echoes the maps of National Geographic, or the diagrams that you might have seen in, Da Vinci's work. And I feel much like Trudy's collage work, that I am discovering a new space when I look at this piece. So Fergie Echeverria is my decision, my choice, my artist to receive an honorable mention award for their work Protector in the Sea. This piece, man, talk about inventive, playful. I really enjoyed the colors. This gave me an intention of a creative mind at play. I appreciated the flow, the composition. I was able to see this very playful, large figure holding, almost embracing a boat. And yet, as playful as this figure was, when you blow it up and you look carefully at this work, there are words and diagrams throughout, almost an effort at precision, something that feels to me like a contrast. So you have this playful piece and then an effort to be very precise. And I felt that the contrast really stayed with me. Last but not least, Meg Walensky has submitted Castle Vanity. And I've chosen Meg's work to receive an honorable mention in the Mind Mapping 2024 exhibition. And I'm so pleased to close our Zoom call with this work of art. I first have to point out the skill and the depth with which she handles her oils and the color choices that she makes. Her contrast between these bright, vibrant neons. I'm seeing orange like Marissa used in her work, but I'm also seeing sort of a neon pink, this incredibly vibrant green, this blue pastel. I also appreciate the contrasts. She's got depth and sort of a three-dimensional quality, and then very flat spaces of color. She has these geometric shapes, and then honestly, very figurative, very recognizable pieces within her composition. In her artist statement, she raises questions of inclusivity and belonging. And I feel like she's given us all these very different, disparate objects. And yet she has chosen so wisely and so well that they've woven together and created a unity. Each piece belongs. I also will tell you and end my comments on this piece in that there's mystery here. In so many of the pieces that I've chosen to receive the Juror's Choice Award, as well as the honorable mention, there's mystery. I can't even pretend to know everything that Meg Walensky was experiencing when she created this piece, and I can't decode it all, but I can sit back and appreciate what she's done and recognize the value in her work. With that, I'm going to kind of thank you all for joining. I really appreciate Amani's willingness to experiment with inviting all the artists. And I feel so privileged to have heard from each of you. So thank you, Amani. Thank you, the Maryland Federation of Art. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the show as a whole online.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miss Murphy, for being so flexible and dynamic. It's not often that a juror is, bringing these questions and kind of pushing us to see what, what we're willing to do. So that was a lot on her end for being a trailblazer in that regard. So I appreciate that. For the artists that are here today, thank you so much, like I said, for giving us your time, your insight. Hopefully we can continue to do it in the future. If we do, you guys were the first batch, so you'll always have that under your belt. Hope to see your work in the gallery and speak to you all soon.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Take care, all.